On this episode of the Hustle the Day podcast, I have Ethan DeAbreu. Ethan is many things. He is a young man who is an author, an accountant, and a sponsored athlete, and just a guy who has his head on straight and understands the long-term ramifications of what he does. I think you're going to like this one. Let's jump into it. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hustle the Day podcast. My name is Trent. Super excited to have Ethan DeAbreu here. Ethan, you are a young guy. You've got a lot going for you already. Why don't you jump in here, tell my audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, hey, Trent. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm honored to be here, and I hope I can provide your audience some value today. So a little bit about me is that I'm 24. I was out of college with my bachelor's degree in accounting, and I started having what I refer to as a quarter-life crisis because I was 21 working in public accounting at the time, and I was just completely exhausted. I didn't understand why I decided to take this path to go here because I just didn't find any enjoyment in my work, and I was trying to understand. I was like, take some perspective, Ethan. Like, this is the time for you. It's like, this is something that you worked for 4 years. People would kill to be in this position, just out of college, having a full-time job. That's the dream, And then to me, I just felt like I was in a nightmare. I looked around my office, and I had a senior accountant, and he was supposed to be my mentor. He was only a few years older than me, and he was losing all his hair from stress. He's sending emails out at 1 o'clock in the morning. And when I would go to him for advice, when I would see things that I didn't agree with, he just told me, he's like, look, you got to stop asking so many questions, and you got to start kissing more ass if you want to move up. And that just never sat right with me, and it never will sit right with me. And I decided to take a moment to look at my life and see what I really wanted. And I have a passion for writing. And beyond that, I think I have a skill for writing, and I have a skill for communication, both with public speaking and with written words. And that's what I wanted to pursue. So I had a platform on Medium, and I started blogging there. I immediately gained an audience. I rose to become one of the top writers in the inspiration category. And then my friends and close family, everyone just kept asking me the same questions. Like, why are you writing articles? Write a book. And, it was such a Goliath of a task to just look at from the outside for so long. It's just like, write a book. It's like, wow, like, that's a lot. It's like, I'm not sure if I'm ready. And, we all kind of do that, right? We all kind of push ourselves off to the side and say, we're not ready for this opportunity. But, maybe if everyone around you is thinking that you are, you should listen. You should take some perspective, focus on it, and move. And that's exactly what I did. I was like, who's to say I'm not ready? Like, what age am I wise enough or knowledgeable enough to write a book? I'm like, age is not wisdom, experience is wisdom. And like, everyone has experiences that they can share and share with others to give value to them. I'm like, you would have to be a very selfish person to not be able to draw value from the experiences of another person. So I just titled my book, The Ink of My Soul and the Fire in My Bones. And that's what that book is. It's just everything. It is the darkest moments of my life, but all of that darkness is it's defeated by the burning fire inside of me. And it's just the fire in my bones. I kept getting hotter and hotter and hotter until I was finally out of the darkness, and I was finally in the place where I wanted to be. And that's what I try to teach to people that read my book or listen to my podcast. It's just that through self-accountability, discipline, focus, tenacity, you can get out of that same darkness and make something better for yourself. And I continue to contribute that exact same message with my podcast, Strength of the Pack.
That is crazy. Like, just the whole story, I did some research before talking to you, and it's like, man, this guy just thinks so deep and just on a different level for, a 24-year-old or 22 when you wrote your book. I mean, like, it's crazy. But I can see where you're coming from when you look at your senior that's telling you, don't ask questions. Like, who says that? Like, that's just not the way to go about life. You need to be asking questions. You need to be understanding and experiencing things, and you've figured that out. And at such a young age, you're like, you want, I'm writing this down. I'm putting this to, pen to paper, which is awesome. I want to talk about your book a little bit. Like you mentioned that it's really about what you get out of these experiences. Did you have any detractors saying, why am I going to read this book by a 22-year-old fresh out of college that thinks he understands life?
Oh yeah, all the time. Like, even it's so sad, honestly, because even like your family will like put down your ideas at times, and your close friends. It was funny. I had someone that I used to work with at one of my jobs, and he'd always strike up conversations with me that I never wanted to have. And I would just call him Devil Dave because he always played devil's advocate. So every time I tell him I'm doing something, or I tell him about something positive that was going on in my life, he played devil's advocate and turn it to the other side and turn it the most cynical light. And it's like you make assumptions about people without even doing the minimal amount of research to have a basis for your opinion. And he made assumptions about me, and he was like, you probably grew up without any struggle at all, and your parents probably gave you everything, and you probably lived this cushy little life. So it's like, so what do you know? And like it's sad that like someone just makes that assumption of you based off of nothing. And then I had friends read my book, and they said, Ethan, you write with like too intense of like a vocabulary, and like people don't really read anymore. So it's like, I think you might isolate a lot of your audience based off of how you write. And I'm like, this is so silly. I'm like, so many people read, and like, so people can draw value from my book, and they have. Like, I've been surprised over and over again. Like, one of the most surprising things that happened to me was on Amazon. Another author who I didn't even know just picked up my book completely at random, read it, and left me like this heart-touching like review about how she was so inspired by my story. And she's in her 60s actually, and it's just like, wow. So it really goes to show it's just that age doesn't matter. It's just experience. It's just your ability to tell a story and your ability to be genuine and honest. Like, I had no ulterior motives with writing my book except from helping other people, as well as helping myself understand myself better and develop. So, when I'm met with that criticism, it doesn't really bother me because it's just not my target audience. If you're giving me that criticism, you're not the person I'm trying to reach because you're just not ready for what I wrote. But if you're, someone my age, you're millennial, right? Like, we have all these books written in the personal development field, but not many like young millennials writing these books. It's always someone who's much older, who has a different perspective on life. And like they're writing another one of those 40 principles and 10 laws and 60 game plans. And like I personally don't like those kind of books because I feel like a lot of times they lack the depth to really make a connection with another person. And with my book, that's not what I do at all. Like, each one of my chapters is just a piece of my soul that's like in that chapter, and it just everything, honesty. And I talk about really difficult things, like I grew up basically in poverty for most of my life. And my father was, he was an abuser in my family, to my mother physically, to me mostly mentally. And just growing up in those kind of circumstances and battling with self-worth and all of that through most of my life is really what pushed me, because I could have very easily decided to just roll over and believe what everyone else was telling me. But innately, I just always had this voice of rebellion in the back of my mind telling me, this doesn't make sense. Like, you need to question what's being told to you right now. It's like, are you really stupid? I'm like, no, you're not, right? Like, your grades disagree, with your father's responses and your father's criticisms of you. Like you're not dumb. I'm like, you're capable of doing things. And that's something I had to fight for a long time. And I finally realized it. I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And like, for a long time in my life, I was living to prove other people wrong. Like, that was the worst thing you could do to me, and I'd always say, it's like, doubt me. It's like, I'll show you. And, like, I always looked at it that way for so long. And like, that hate and that anger, like, push my fire, like, to grow. It's like, you want to doubt me? It's like, I'll show you exactly how wrong you are. But as I grew older, I learned to kind of just forgive like those people and forgive myself for being angry. I'm like, I don't want to live this way. I don't want to be motivated by hate and anger. And now, as of almost a year now, happily married, and I'm motivated by love, motivated by love of life, motivated just by my passion for possibility and boundless imagination for like what the world can be, what I can have, and what I can do if I'm just accountable for my own life.
Well, first of all, congratulations on being married almost a year now. I'm 12 years deep into marriage now. But it is definitely, thank you. It is definitely something that can drive you and motivate you. But all it took was for me to listen to your podcast, Strength of the Pack, where I was like, wow, this guy he just has a different level of understanding. Like there should be no doubt on you being able to share an experience and have it resonate at such a young age. So who do you think inspired you to become such a deep thinker and question things at such a young age?
It's a difficult question. It's just, I don't think anyone necessarily inspired me to become a deep thinker, but people inspired me to continue to pursue that route. So like, ever since I was a child, I always had a lot of questions, and it would get to the point where it would be cumbersome, like to my teachers, and like they're just like, "All right, shut up, like we get it, like you have questions," and people just don't want to answer you anymore. Then there is Google that was introduced to me in the second grade, and that's how I started getting all the answers that I needed. And like I just have an appreciation and a constant like buzzing curiosity in my mind for what goes on in the world. As for people that inspire me to follow that train of thought, I think of people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Elon Musk, or Joe Rogan, and even like Andy Frisella. Like he's a deep thinker, like, and he's honest. So like for me, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a huge influence when I was young. I read his, bodybuilding encyclopedia. I would listen to his interviews. One of my favorite interviews he ever did was with Tim Ferriss. He was like, "Call me whatever you want, Governor Schnitzel, Arnold. I don't care." And I love that personality. I love that confidence. And like, when you really look into Arnold's life, he was so much more than just like a bodybuilder. He was just a self-made man. Came to the country with nothing, became one of the most famous bodybuilders in all of history. He's a household name. Everyone knows him. Everyone knows his accent. Everyone has his impersonation. He became the governor of California. It's just like Hollywood stardom. And he's an icon to American history. He's an icon. It's just, he just stands out because he's someone that questioned the world he was born into and saw the possibilities of what he could have. And, Elon Musk is very much the same way. He's just constantly reimagining. He doesn't care if other people think he's crazy. He's like, I see it in my mind, so I'm going to, put pen to paper and make it work. And then he's just such a creative genius to the point where he has to make The Boring Company, which is like his fun company, where he just makes his nonsensical ideas. One of the first things he sold was his Not a Flamethrower, which was not a flamethrower on a technicality, but it operated in a similar manner. And he's like, yeah. It's like, if it was a flamethrower, I couldn't sell it, but it's not a flamethrower. So just make sure the branding's on point, and he did that. And, like Joe Rogan, he's an icon as well, just in the podcasting industry. And like he says all the time, his goal is not to be inspirational or anything like that, but that's not really for him to say. It's just like people find him inspirational because he works hard. He speaks the truth. People value his opinion, and Andy Frisella very much the same. He drives me like insane with inspiration. Like I'll turn him on, like any of his podcasts. Like now it's, what is it? Real Talk. I'm forgetting the name right now. But then before
Real AF, yeah.
Real AF, and then there was the motherfucking CEO, and like those two podcasts. Like when I'm running and just having him like yell in my ear, it's like listening to my own inner voice yelling at me. He's like, "Really?" It's like, "Is that all you got? Like, do more. It's no excuses." And and I'm like, wow, like this is the exact kind of energy that I need in my life, and like. Like the expression that like the teacher will present himself and the student is ready. Like, the beauty of the digital age is that you don't need a physical person in front of you to teach you the mindset that you need to be successful. It's just because all these people have podcasts, they have books, they have interviews, they have knowledge that they have shared in the world in one form or another that can help you develop. And, just as easily as we can turn on the TV to watch Netflix, we can Google some inspirational interviews with some amazing people and just gain some tidbits of knowledge and experience from them and try to apply it to our own lives.
Very cool. Yeah. There's so many inspirational individuals out there, and I appreciate that you shared some of those with us. But before I trip over my words, what do you hope to leave as inspiration behind, or how do you plan to make a difference in what you're doing?
That's always what's in my mind. It's just, how can I make a difference? And I realized that the way that I can make a difference through, like, if I want people to be inspired by my book, right? Like, I can write really flowery sentences that sound great, and like those one-liners that are like, yeah, that hits me, right? But what I realized is that if I can't draw inspiration from my own words and my own beliefs, how can I expect anyone else to draw inspiration from my words and my beliefs? So I have to become the embodiment of what I say and what I think I can be. And for me, the way that I can provide that value to the world is by holding myself accountable. Like, every day I exercise. I don't care if it's raining outside. I don't care if it's snowing. Like, I exercise. Like, I have to do that for myself. It's a mandatory thing because I preach its importance in my book. So therefore, I have to live by that standard for other people to appreciate and understand the importance of, physical effort. I try to be accountable with just my finances, my shortcomings, and just, my own personal setbacks in life, because how often do people fail? And they fail all the time, and we just don't realize it. But some people find finality in their failures, and they think, this is it. I did my best. I shot my shot, and, that's it. There's just no other opportunities on the table. And that's just not good enough. Like, to me, it's just that I failed so many times in so many different things. And I say that, and it could be funny because I'm still only in my 20s, but it doesn't matter. I still feel the weight of those failures, and I still feel the stress of those failures. And I'm just like, is this it? And the answer should always be no. It's you're never too old to start a new venture. There's always time to develop yourself. You gotta find it, because once you stop developing, to me, that's the real death. It's once you stop working on yourself, that's death. Because we are supposed to be in constant motion. Our bodies are machines, our minds are machines, and we have to use them. Otherwise, they just depreciate and lose all their value.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's so many people that buy into that finality of failure, and that is unfortunate. And I agree with you. If you aren't improving, you're dying. That's just the way I see life is. You've got to always be trying something new, doing something different, trying to become a better person than you were the day before. Speaking of, the failures, what would you say has been your biggest failure in going out on your own, becoming a sponsored athlete, becoming an author, a podcast host, and then what did you learn from that failure?
Yeah, constant failures all the time. With working out, all right, maybe I have to think about this. So perhaps the biggest, most public failure that I've had, rather than the quiet personal ones that people don't really see, was I used to debate, right? And I went to this conference, and I prepared for an entire year to go to this conference and debate in front of a room of 300 people to lawyers for fun, because that's what I think is fun. And I got up there with my team, and one member of my team wasn't prepared and got scared and pretended to have laryngitis, so she couldn't talk, right? And she just started speaking with the frog voice when we were up there to try to excuse herself from presenting, right? And we just got annihilated by the other team because we didn't have the parts. And it's just, I was so frustrated with my team member because she didn't perform her part. But then in reflection years throughout the year, what I realized is that it's my fault. It's not her fault that we failed. It's like I was the leader and I should have done a better job to make sure we were all prepared. And like there were things that I could have done better to make sure that we succeeded. And like swallowing that pill was hard. So for the next year, I worked as hard as I could. Like I was still like in school at the time, and like I had no one to get me there. I didn't have a license, and like I just walked 5 miles at night to go to school and like just prepare for this moment, because that's the only thing I could think about was just winning. And after a year of preparation, I went back and I became the best debater in the state. I had the best entire law firm in the state. And then I was also like an exemplar for the program for my debating skills. And just like that failure for 1 year just burned in my mind for a year. And I was just like, I know I'm capable of more. And even though failing in front of 300 people sucks, it's like, it's not the end, like you kind of have to own the humiliation. But then more on like the personal quiet failures, it's just that I lived in poverty to basically a year ago when I got married because I was the patriarch of my family. Like I did everything like to make sure we survived. Like my mom worked really hard, but right out of college, I was already making more money and I was like at the low end of the spectrum, like on the totem pole of like entry level. And I had a younger brother who was going to college and he was still trying to figure out his own path. And like, I've always kind of had more of a parental relationship than a sibling relationship with my younger brother. And I had to be the guiding force and I had to be, the pillar for my family. And if I crumbled, everyone else would have crumbled too. But every day, like the pillar was just cracking because I was working so hard. I was working like 11 hours a day in my office job and I just grinding it out so we could pay the bills on time. And at the end of everything, I was just left with $4 a month. That's all I had left to me every single time. There was no, going to Marshall's, eating out at McDonald's or like any of that. Like it was all dedicated focus. And like the things that I was not willing to compromise on, even though I was broke, was the gym and a basic meal plan. Like I would only spend $30 to $40 a week on a meal plan. I went as lean as possible, but I'm a good shopper because that's what being like in poverty basically teaches you. It teaches you how to be frugal or it teaches you how to whine. It's like I could have complained and said I didn't have enough. I can't afford the yogurt this week. It's just like do what you can with what you have and make the best of the situation around you. And that's always what I've done. And from doing that, just these small little arbitrages, just taking advantage of these situational differences in order to reach some sort of profit for myself in my own life has finally brought me to the position that I'm in now. And I'm like, wow, there's actually a balance in my bank account. Like, that's weird. Like I have savings, like I have an investment account. Like that's weird. Like, this is all new to me. And that was the failure that ate away at me my whole life. Just being poor, like just not having more. But I realized was that you have to endure. You have to be ready to endure the pain of not having the things you want, even though you think about it all the time. And you just have to endure that hardship on your own, like to the best of your ability and persevere past it. Because once your mindset crumbles, that's the real failure. That is the true defeat. So my mindset was the strongest thing that I have in me. And I wasn't willing to let that concede to anyone else's beliefs but my own, because I saw the path. I didn't need them to tell it to me. And by sticking to those thoughts and those beliefs, I was finally able to arbitrage myself and just get out, position myself for success. And now, like, I actually feel like I have my feet on the ground. I can start running. Like I tell my friends a lot, I'm like, in life, a lot of people are taking that proverbial half-court shot at success, and sometimes you got to go for the layup, just do the layup. But then I said, for me, doing that layup, felt like I was crawling to that layup with ankle weights around me. And I'm just crawling towards that opportunity. And when I finally got my shot, I took it and I made it. And now here I am. And I'm just, nowhere near done, like completely in the process, just building, because especially with the digital age now, it's just that you see it all the time. It's possible. Like, those are the words I live by. I'm like, it is possible. Like, anything you can put your mind to is possible if you're willing to be accountable. And I am, because I'm just not satisfied with average.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I love how you related the layup. I mean, the fundamentals of basketball is what they teach you. You don't go in there and first thing it's like, all right, let's practice our Steph Curry half court shots. That's just not how it goes. They teach you the fundamentals, the dribbling, the layups, the free throws, all those things that seem so boring, but that's what really makes it, stick throughout your basketball career, using the basketball terms. But you also hit on another thing, accountability. You mentioned that multiple times, not necessarily in words, but, talking about the debate. You were holding yourself to a higher accountability because a teammate failed. And not a lot of people are willing to do that. And I think that's where you are really going to make a difference in your own life, is holding yourself accountable to whatever it may be. And really it comes down to, I think, the discipline that you have. So I want to touch on that a little bit. What, in your podcast, you talk a little bit about the difference between discipline and motivation. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So, the problem is that everyone loves being motivated, right? Like, it feels good. You feel great. You get that little endorphin rush and you're like, wow, I just watched that great movie and I saw him become all the things that I want to become through hard work and effort. Wow, I'm going to go to the gym like next Monday or something. And like, it never happens. I'm like motivation is a chemical reaction that has a very short half-life, right? Like, you can rely on that radioactive energy and just burn it up, burn white hot, and just for a few minutes, like, you feel like the world is yours. But it burns out in a few seconds. Like, you're left with nothing. If you're relying on motivation to pursue your goals, like, you'll always fall short. Like, you'll never be where you want to be. I believe in discipline, and discipline involves building the dam, getting that hydroelectric energy. It takes time to build a dam, but when it's done, you could constantly yield a steady flow of energy throughout your life. And like, some may argue, like, using my metaphor, it's that, radioactive energy is like, that's a lot of energy. It's like, you sure you really want to be leaving that off to the side? And I'm like, yeah. I'd rather draw energy from a sustainable source in my life that I know is there and I know is not going to contaminate me in any sort of way or leave me radioactive. I'd rather just be active instead of radioactive. So to me, it's just drawing from discipline really starts with fortifying your mind, right? Because a lot of us, especially now, we're more enabled to say, I can't. We're more enabled to be like, I can't do this because of this. Like, I can't do this because of that. Like, I feel terms like anxiety and depression get a little abused, especially in my generation. It's just not everyone has clinical depression. Not everyone has clinical anxiety. And if you did have it, I'm sure you wouldn't be wearing it like a badge of honor as to why you never tried. So where it comes is discipline. You have to acknowledge what you want and acknowledge that it's going to take steps to get there. You are not a failure for not having what you want. And that's something that a lot of people kind of do in their mind. They write off the possibility of them ever being successful because they don't have the things they want, or they value really like shallow things. Like when they envision success in their lives, it's, I want to be a millionaire. Like, I want to have a Lamborghini. And like, what I say is like, shallow dreams have shallow graves. Like, they die quick just with motivation. So with discipline, you have to fortify your mind. And like, the scariest part of that is that it requires you to be introspective. It requires you to sit down with yourself and ask yourself, who am I? What do I really want to do? And how do I do it? And once you're able to answer those questions within yourself, And like the how do I do it is probably the most important part, because we all see the thing we want, but we're just, how do you do it? Because you can. It is possible. It may not happen in a year. It may not happen in 2. It may happen in 5 or 10. But if you're able to set goals and then set achievable smaller goals while we're working to that goal, you will eventually succeed. So with discipline, it comes down to having confidence in yourself, in your mind, saying like, I'm a work in process. Other people may not understand what I'm doing, but I don't need them to. When other people try to douse my fire inside of me and tell me that I'm not good enough, or I don't know what I'm talking about, and I shouldn't be doing this because of this, I'm just not going to listen to them. Just put in your earbuds, ignore them, and focus on your work, focus on your hustle, do your grind, and just go. Because with discipline, you're really not worried about the opinions of other people, because they don't understand the significance of your dreams to you. You know, they only understand it from an outside perspective. And the thing is that a lot of people in general just don't understand what opportunities are really out there if you go looking for them. Like, you can achieve something that'll blow the minds of all your friends and family, and they'll think, wow, he did it. And they suddenly switch to your team. Whereas like a few months before, they're all like, oh, you never have a chance. Like, you're just a bum. Like, you're trying to cheat the system because you don't want to work a real job. Like, you know, you want to own a business. And it's just like, you really just can't concern yourself with those people. Like, it hurts. It hurts when your people closest to you don't believe in you. But the only person closer than them is you. It's yourself. So what really matters is do you believe in you? And you should. Like at its core, like for me, that's always kind of what kept me alive. Is that in the past, I put my faith in other people before my own. And I believed what they told me, like to a degree, more than myself. Then one day I just had enough. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done letting you define me. I want to show you who I really am. And the best way to show someone who you really are is just work as hard as you can, live to your words, and do more than you say.
That's very cool. So I love that you know, as we're talking, you talk about the fact that even when you're working 11, 12 hours a day, you are just barely scraping that poverty line, you still stayed consistent with working out. And I think that perfectly relates to the discipline versus motivation, because I mean, if you, in your space of being involved in fitness and working out, discipline always wins out over motivation in that regard, because one day you're motivated, hey, I'm going to accomplish this goal, I'm going to lose this weight, I'm going to build this muscle, and it lasts a couple of days. But you consistently going no matter what has now led you to be in a position where you're a sponsored athlete for a fitness company. I mean, that's awesome that discipline got you to that point. This has honestly been a super awesome, super deep conversation that I don't usually get to this level on this podcast. So this is very cool that you are, you know, bearing your soul on the podcast in a way.
Hey, I'm happy to share. You know, it's just, what's the point if I'm not going to be honest?
Right. Absolutely. And, you know, you've had, you're a little bit behind me in terms of how many guests you've had on your podcast. Have you had any of those things that kind of blown you away with guests that you've interviewed?
Honestly, one of perhaps my first guest was Nicholas Calabro. It was kind of funny because me and him had both gone to college together, and we never spoke to each other, like not once, right? And never crossed paths. Like I seen him, but nothing significant, no friendship. And one day he reached out to me because he was listening to a different podcast I had at a point, and he was like, "This is awesome." He's like, "I love this," and he's like, "I really connected with this." He's like, "Can we get a beer? Like, can we just talk?" And you know, we got a beer. We talked about life, and he did a lot of the same things that I did because he went to school for accounting, just like me. And within a year, he is like, I fucking hate this. He's like, I hate working like this, because in public accounting, unlike private accounting, you're working 90 to 100 hours a week in your busy season. You're salaried, so you're only getting paid 40 hours of work. And, like I was talking to some people the other day, and they were like, yeah, it's like I left public accounting because, like I just couldn't work to 2 a.m. And I'm like, yeah, the workload sucks. She's like, it wasn't so much the workload. It was just working to 2 a.m. I'm like, yeah, those things are like directly correlated. Like working to 2 a.m. and the workload. And to me, it was exactly that, So with him, he was like, I have no passion for this. It's like, just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I have to do it. So he took some time to really reflect on what he wanted. And fortunately for him, he had a good friend that believed in him and believed in the work that he did. And she gave him the opportunity to work at a photography firm just as a photographer. And he went back to school, got an MBA in marketing instead of going down the accounting route. And now he works full time as a photographer, doing his own thing, because he worked so hard when he was in the studio, and that he impressed the people around him, and they just kept giving him more work, and they kept trying to teach him new things. And like, he opened himself up to an experience by challenging where he was. And that's hard for a lot of people. Like, just like we all, when we think about college, when you're 17, 18, all you're thinking about, how much money am I going to make? It's like, that's what you look at. You look at the salaries, it's right there. Like, not many people are thinking about life realistically. It's like, sure, it sounds great to be like, you look at one profession, you look at another, and you're like, yeah, I'm making double. This is where I want to be. It sounds great until you're living it. When you're there, it's just like, wow. If you can't draw any satisfaction from your work, and the person making half as much as you is thrilled to go to work every day, who really won? And it's like, that person won. The person who's happy to be doing what they're doing, because we neglect our mental health in pursuit of like monetary things, like monetary rewards. And that's what we've been conditioned to do from movies, from books, from like any story. It's always like when we see success, like naturally we kind of attribute it to like being a millionaire, like Moneyball, like making the Big Short, like making those crazy trades, and then overnight, boom, you're a millionaire. And like, maybe like that's not the wealth we should be seeking. Like, I think real wealth kind of starts within. It's like valuing yourself, valuing what you're capable of, and acknowledging what makes you happy. And that's what really impressed me about that guest, because we didn't have a friendship before that day. And before we podcasted, we both went out. We did some photography together. He took some shots. I took some shots. He gave me some tips with photography to help me improve. I showed him some little things that I knew. And it's just like, together, we built a friendship in a day, because we understood like what drove the other person. And what really gets me in a guest, like what really fires me up, is that intuitive nature. It's just people that are curious. Those are the people that really just inspire the hell out of me.
Very cool. Yeah, that's, I've had a similar story where, there's somebody that we were on the same path, same group, and we just never really talked. And then once we did, years down the road, it just clicked, and we're like, this is great. So I'm glad you can relate to that. And you were able to connect with him and be able to share your a passion together of photography, because I know that's one of your passions as well. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. I've been super inspired by this, and I love this, and I'm going to turn this into discipline. But I want to ask you, personal or business, what is it that excites you about the future?
Just the boundlessness of possibilities and the boundlessness of my imagination of what those possibilities can be. So for me, I just see everything that I want in the world, and I understand that there is a path to get there. And as long as I'm willing to walk on my own path with my wife, and together we're on the same team and we're working towards the same objectives, I know we're going to achieve it. Like we all our friends, like they'll tell us like, it's like, oh, you two are goals, quote unquote, and like, you guys like have your shit together, like versus like other people like in our age group. And I'm like, yeah, we have our shit together. Like that is the number one thing. And, our relationship is successful because we communicate everything with each other. Like I tell her all the time, I'm like, I will die if I don't achieve my goals in this lifetime. I'm like, I want you to know that. And she's the exact same way. She's equally fired up as me to be successful in life. So together, what we imagine success as is just being able to do things we love. Like I want to write more books because I love connecting with people that way. Like when people send me a message that I don't even know who they are and they're speaking to me like I'm a friend, they're like, wow, like, thank you so much, like for this, or like this helped me with that. Like that's the feeling I live for, like that connection. Cause I always say it's like real human connection is always out there. And like what I try to communicate, even with my podcast, is strength of the pack. It's like, you are not alone, together we are stronger. So I try to facilitate a space for where people who are entrepreneurial, people who are questioning the systems around them and where they fit into it, can come together and share ideas and grow together. And, like goals for the future, it's just, I want to eventually earn the right to have my own TED Talk. I want to grow my audience so I'm able to reach more people, have a positive impact on as many people as possible. I want to achieve my own personal fitness goals and my own, like, just little things. Like I love, I have a personal love for fantasy as well, like fantasy and fiction. And like, I want to try my hand in writing that too, and it's just like, why do I have to just be one thing? And like, the answer is that I don't. So together, me and her, like, we want to achieve those things. She does a lot of the same things. Fitness, she's a poet, she has her own podcast. We both want to travel together and, like learn new languages, learn new things. Like I always say, I'll never be one of those rich people that are just sad, because they have nothing to do. Because I'm just endlessly curious. Like there's just so much culture, beauty, and just like mystery in the world that's enough to keep my mind occupied. And everything is just a Google search away from going down a different rabbit hole of curiosity.
Yeah, you definitely have a bright future ahead of you. And, I want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to talk to me. Where is a good place for people to connect with you online?
The best place would definitely be on my Instagram. It'd be at Ethan DeAbreu and at Strength of the Pack Pod. You can check out my website, ethandeabreu.com, to see some of the other things that I make. If you want to find my book, it is The Ink of My Soul and the Fire in My Bones. It's on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. And my podcast is on all major platforms, Strength of the Pack. So any of those mediums would be a great way to reach me.
Perfect. I'll make sure to include links to those in the show description. But again, thank you, Ethan. And I know I've gotten a ton of value out of this. So I know my audience has gotten a ton of value out of this. So I encourage you all to get out there and hustle the day.
Hey, Hustle Nation. Thank you for listening to the podcast all the way through. Super appreciative of that. I know you've gotten a lot of value out of this, and I want to continue providing the value. So I've created a free Facebook group called Hustle the Day. Really easy to remember if you've listened to this podcast. Anyway, go check it out on Facebook. Great community of people just like you that are trying to escape the 9-to-5, get that side hustle to replace their main income. Whatever the case may be, you've got a great support group there. Go check it out. I really appreciate it. You all have a great one.